is News Hour, live from the BBC with me, Tim Franks. In Ethiopia, several people have died in protest following the killing of the hugely popular musician Hachalu Hundessa. He was shot on the outskirts of the capital, Addis Ababa, as he was driving on Monday evening. The police say they're investigating. Many of Hachalu's songs were intensely political, focusing on the rights of the Oromo ethnic group. They became anthems sung at protests which led to the downfall of the previous Prime Minister in 2018. Zechariah Zelalem is a journalist with the Addis Standard.
Hachalu Hundessa, in the eyes of Ethiopians and in particular the Oromos, was much more than just a musician. His lyrics inspired much of the resistance, the uprisings of 2015 and 2016, the uprisings that culminated in the appointment of Abiy Ahmed as Prime Minister and in the ushering in of an era of reform. So Hachalu grew up in an era where most of us were afraid to speak up on critical issues because there was such a razor-thin tolerance for dissent and outspokenness. So many of those who defied the government norms ended up behind bars. So it was uplifting to see an artist who fought more for the masses instead of for his own well-being and sung the lyrics on what would normally in the eyes of the government be taboo topics.
And tell me about his one song that is perhaps more famous than any other.
So Malanjira is a song about, he basically laments the systematic displacement of the Oromo people by successive Ethiopian governments. In particular, the displacement of Oromos from the capital city area where they once lived around. The song release came at a time where the Ethiopian government in 2014-15 was planning an expansion of the capital city that would have resulted in the displacing of more people, more innocent farmers in the area. So a lot of people saw it as a sort of rallying cry. It solidified his status as an icon in the eyes of most Oromos.
The Oromos, correct me if I'm wrong, Zechariah, but from what I understand, they're the biggest ethnic group in Ethiopia, and yet for decades they were sort of marginalized, they were sidelined. The new Prime Minister, relatively new Prime Minister, Abiy Ahmed, is Oromo himself. When he came to office, political prisoners were released, rebel groups were welcomed back to fight in elections. What's gone wrong, or what's been going wrong, that's perhaps led to the death today of Hachalu?
Yes, you are correct in stating that the Oromo, despite there being the largest ethnic group in terms of population, they have been on the periphery of the Ethiopian establishment for much of the past century. And it is something that a lot of people thought had seen its end when the new prime minister was ascended to the premiership. In the 2 years since, there has been a growing rift between the Oromo people and the ruling party. For many reasons. Principal among them, I would say, is the fact that the government continues to wage a military campaign to oust the Oromo Liberation Army insurgency in Wallaga. And the soldiers that have been deployed by Abiy Ahmed are accused of a variety of abuses extending to war crimes, and this is something that has been recently documented by Amnesty International. It was only a few weeks ago that Hachalu Hundessa gave an interview in which he criticized Abiy Ahmed. He said Abiy Ahmed had sold the Oromo people short and that his optimistic had waned considerably since 2018. So he pretty much echoed the fact that there was a growing rift between the Oromo masses and their Oromo prime minister. And of course, after what happened today, one can only say that that rift has widened considerably.
Zechariah Zelalem, journalist with the Addis Standard. The BBC's Prague correspondent says he's seen nothing like it in decades, perhaps the most